What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Control Room. I'm your host, Esrael Johannes. There's a lot to get to. The first round of the NBA playoffs is over, and we're on to the second round. Two of the teams that I cover, the Mavericks and the Thunder, have made it to the second round. We're going to get into all that, but first, I did want to talk about my experience for Game 3 of the Mavs-Clippers series. The reason why, that game was in Dallas at the American Airlines Center, and I had gotten a text from my crew saying if I was available. Didn't understand why, because the studio was dark that day. He explained, I'm sending you out there. So this was my first taste of having that experience in that arena. I had been at Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium for high school football, but nothing of this caliber of professional sports. So having this be my first go-around, a playoff game, the first one at home this year, and for it to be a win in the way that it was, I mean, I got to, prepare the pregame graphics like normal. But then during the game, got to go up into the stands and talk with our talent, talk with my producer, and just kind of write some notes down while the game was happening right in front of me and hearing the crowd roar on a crazy dunk. Lots of good stuff coming from the game itself. Even earlier in that day, when I was going into media dining, it was a side-by-side with ESPN. Next to our table, there was a table of ESPN people. So you had Mike Breen, JJ Redick, Tim McMahon just sitting at that table while we were just kind of on our own doing dinner stuff. And I got to say hello to Mike Breen while I was getting some water. He's a very gracious man in his response. That was cool. I mean, there was just so much good stuff. So many good memories from that one game, and I hope to get to do that more often, although given the company situation, it might be few and far between, so I'll take what I can get. But that was a crazy game, a lot of fun, nothing more to be said. All right, the top topics for this episode. The Mavericks took down the LA Clippers 4-2. The Pelicans and the Thunder. The Thunder swept the Pelicans. There's not much more I'm going to talk about the Pelicans for the rest of the season. But because the Thunder were involved, they await the Mavericks. The Mavericks are their next opponent. And then across the NBA, we'll take a look at the updated bracket. Give my predictions for the second round at the end of the episode. All right, let's start with Mavs over Clippers in Game 5. I want to take a look at this game. Luka had 35 points on 14 of 26 shooting, which is 53.8%. He only shot 2 of 8 from 3, 25%. 5 of 5, perfect from the free throw line, with 7 rebounds, 10 assists, and a steal. His 35 points were the most points he scored this series, so we were waiting for a game like this where he shot over 50%, where he got more than 30. It was his 16th straight road playoff game with 20 or more points, the most to start a career in NBA playoff history. He had passed Michael Jordan, who had 15 from 1985 to 1989. It was also the first game this series shooting 50% or better from the floor. And these were his fewest three-point field goal attempts this series, at 8, at least entering that game. So for him, it was a matter of not shooting the three ball as much, prioritizing going inside, utilizing his teammates just a little bit more. I mean, he played great in this game. He also became the first player since Oscar Robertson to record his 4th career playoff game of 35 or more points and 10 or more assists against a single opponent. Now, if you look at Sport Radar, for some reason it doesn't go before 1967, 1968. So this note came from inside the NBA on TNT. However, I was able to confirm at least since 67 to 68, Luka's the only one to do it since then. So, of course, Big O did it before then. Dallas outscored the LA Clippers in the paint and off turnovers. And that's a big advantage when you can score in those miscellaneous categories, like I had mentioned at the very beginning of the season. They had a 56 to 46 advantage in paint points and a 21 to 7 advantage in points off turnovers. Dallas only committed 10 turnovers while the Clippers committed 15. And if you look at stocks, which is a combination of steals and blocks, a combo defensive stat, if you will, Dallas had 11 of those, 5 steals and 6 blocks, while the Clippers only had 4, and they were all steals. They didn't have a single block. Dallas also had 6 double-digit scores in this game, and the last time they'd done that in the playoffs was the 2022 Western Conference Finals, Game 4 versus the Warriors, which was the only game they won against the Warriors. They'd won 4 straight playoff games with 6 or more double-digit scores, so formula for success, just have everyone eat, probably win the game. That's something to look forward to in the next series and potentially beyond. Let's also take a look at the second quarter lineup for the Mavs in that game, because that was the lineup that went on the run that eventually put them up by 10 at half, and then they just kind of took off the rest of the way. In the second quarter, the Mavs had Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Derrick Jones Jr., Maxi Kleber, and Daniel Gafford. They went on a 12-2 run near the end of the second quarter. Maxi had 4 of his threes in the second quarter, finished with 15 points on 5 of 7 shooting from 3, 71.4%. He scored 15 points across his first 4 games of the series, but he finished with 15 in Game 5, so a much better performance in this game compared to the rest of the series. It also tied his 5 threes, tied the second most threes made in his playoff career. Then on the Clippers side, Paul George only scored 15 points, so he matched Maxi. Great job. 4 of 13 shooting from the floor, 30.8%. 2 of 6 from 3, 33.3%. 5 of 6 from the free throw line, 83.3%. 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 turnovers. Meanwhile, James Harden scored a measly 7 points on 2 of 12 shooting, 16.7%. 1 of 7 from 3, 14.3%. 4 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 turnovers. So, needless to say, the Mavs really played a lot of good defense on the Clippers, and they had offensive firepower from everybody coming in, but especially that second quarter lineup. I'm going to get into what I think about Jason Kidd's lineups, but one of the details I want you to remember is that if you were to have Maxi Kleber on the floor, I know he's currently hurt with that shoulder injury, that you need a big man next to him, like Daniel Gafford, like Derek Lively II. That'll contribute to more success for the Mavericks. Moving on to Game 6, I want to talk about how the Mavs closed out the series at home. Kyrie and Luka had another one of those games. Kyrie scored 30 points on 28 of them coming in the second half. He ties the most points in any playoff half in his career. He did something similar, I believe, in Game 4, where he dropped 40 but didn't score in the first quarter. So Kyrie seems to be getting in strides late in the game, which is still good if he scores 30 or more. I mean, that's outstanding. Luka had 28 points, 7 rebounds, 13 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. Now, when you look at how he shot the ball all series long, he shot below 50% from the floor in 5 of 6 games in the series and shot below 40% from 3 in all 6 games this series. So for him, he wasn't really efficient from the floor at all besides Game 5, at least to his standards, and yet he was still effective. So there's still more Luka, a better Luka to come if he can overcome that knee sprain he's going through and be a little bit more efficient from the floor. Another detail, they got Ivica Zubac in foul trouble. Game 5, he had 4 fouls and finished with 15 points on 7 of 8 shooting, 87.5%. And that's ridiculous. 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal on 25 minutes and 41 seconds. In Game 6, he had 5 fouls, finished with 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 54.5%, 11 rebounds, and played 37 minutes and 2 seconds. Now, if you're thinking, okay, his stats are outstanding, yes, they are, which is why he needed to have gotten in foul trouble. Because had he been on the floor even longer, the Mavs might have had more of a problem trying to close out the Clippers. And so that's going to be something that they try to implement in future series. Now, more defense on Paul George and James Harden, but also Russell Westbrook. They combined for 40 points. 40. Among three guys, 40. On 13 of 41 shooting, 31.7%. 2 of 17 from 3. That's 11.8%. And the 2 makes came from Paul George. Need I say more? The Mavs also prioritized the big men. Derek Lively II and Daniel Gafford in the series. Lively II averaged 10.5 points per game in the 4 wins, 5.5 points per game in the 2 losses. Daniel Gafford scored 7.3 points per game in the 4 wins, only 4 points per game in the 2 losses. So almost double their scoring in the wins than in the losses. There's a bit more of a usage of those big men that lead to better results for the Mavericks. And in Game 6, of course, they did play more because Maxey got hurt early in that game. So that contributed to these numbers. The Mavs also played fast. They had 15 fast break points in Game 5, 16 of them in Game 6. They had at least 10 fast break points in all 6 games in the series and averaged 15.5 fast break points per game the entire series. So that's a lot better than what they were averaging last year, definitely. But they were also above league average this season. If you look at this series based on, and then compare it to, I should say, the NBA average, the league average in the regular season. They also forced a lot of turnovers and then capitalized on them. It's one thing to force them, it's another thing to make the other team pay. In Game 5, the Mavs scored 21 points off 15 LA Clipper turnovers. And then in Game 6, 17 points off of 11 LAC turnovers. They averaged 13.5 forced turnovers per game in the series. And they scored an average of 18.5 points off turnovers per game against the Clippers. So all of those factors contributed to the closeout win, the series win for the Mavericks over the Clippers. And it's a constant theme. It's a cycle of, do the same thing that I've been mentioning over and over. The miscellaneous categories, all the dirty work. Take care of those margins, and you'll be a lot better for it. And they proved it in this first series. Now, for those of us who are broadcasting the game or the studio shows around it, how do you broadcast for a series win or a loss? Let's say it's a Game 7. It did not go to a Game 7, but let's say we were on a Game 7, like the Dallas Stars were. You have to prepare for every eventuality, because let's say if you were only preparing for a win and then they lost, you have nothing to show for them losing. And it's going to be your last show of the broadcast. Now, those of us in local TV, this was going to be the closeout game, was going to be the last show we do no matter what. So you might as well be prepared for both sides. Now, for the graphics, you start with graphics showing the next matchup. This is in case they win. And then in that case, that would have been the OKC Thunder because they had already beaten the Pelicans. And then you also have to have graphics ready in case they're eliminated, such as free agency, draft pick lists, season stats, elimination game comparisons, like Luka in elimination games versus Dirk in elimination games, or Kyrie versus some other player. You want to have those things ready to go, because if you try to build that while also building stuff that applied just to that one game, you're not going to have enough time. There's just not enough time to put all that together that close to the end of the game. And then let's say playback, like EVS. They'll have game recaps, playoff recaps, season recaps, stuff that they can go to kind of kill some time, show what the Mavericks did or show what their team did throughout the whole season. I think a better example of this would be Cleveland and Orlando. They were in a Game 7 situation, and both broadcasts were probably ready for if their team won or lost. And they had to basically have two versions of a rundown in case it went either way. So that's a little sneak peek into how we do things, just a little bit. In those situations, in playoff environments, in closeout environments, elimination environments, those kinds of things. Now that we've taken care of the Mavericks, let's transition to the Pelicans and the Thunder. That's coming up in the next segment. And preview what we got coming up in the second round. Stay tuned. The Oklahoma City Thunder have not lost a game in the playoffs just yet. They swept the New Orleans Pelicans 4-0 in the first round. New Orleans never scored more than 92 points. And for them, 5 of the 7 lowest offensive outings this season came at the hands of the Thunder. That's regular season and postseason combined. They lost all 7 of those lowest offensive outings. And all 4 playoff games are included in this list. So for the Pelicans, let's take a quick look at their offseason outlook. There's not much left to talk about them in terms of stats. And for them at this point, they just need to get healthy. Try to run it back next season before it gets too expensive to hold on to Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III. Those are going to be some coveted pieces. They're pretty early on in their careers. They're due for a big payday. They're shooting great from 3. Herb has shown he's worthy of all defense. Trey Murphy III has contributed to one of the best defensive lineups in the NBA. So it's not going to be possible for the Pelicans to hang on to Zion and Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum and those 2 guys while also dealing with the fact that Jonas Valanciunas is an unrestricted free agent this summer. So there's a lot of things that David Griffin, the GM, has to put together to make sure that this team can have a chance next year and for the foreseeable future. They also, in my opinion, should revisit the point guard conundrum. Because although the James Borrego offense alleviated the stress of Zion Williamson handling all the scoring, without a point guard, you're going to have some problems in the clutch, which is what they dealt with all year long. They kind of had no one to go to except Zion doing Zion things. And naturally, you would think, do the same thing you did all game long. That's what Aaron Hardigan and I talked about in the last episode. But it'd be a lot easier if you just had a point guard. It really would be. A true point guard. Not CJ being a combo guard and trying to play point. Or Zion being a point forward. It's just something that they should revisit. I think they should try to get a point guard if they don't think that who they have is enough. That being said, I do want to thank the Pelicans for this season. Thanks for letting me cover you all season long. It's been fun watching this team grow before our very eyes and improve from start to finish. So if they can get another season under their belt with this lineup, it's good for everybody. This is them having success, at least for our region, is good for the NBA. Zion having success is good for the NBA. We need to see more superstars get to the end and still be playing. Now let's take a look at the Thunder, because their next opponent is the Mavericks. Now, I'm not really going to do a series preview. I had actually done that a few episodes ago. So I will make sure to put up a card, put up a link, so that you can go to that direct episode and watch what I say there. It's pretty much the same thing. Nothing has changed since then. One thing that does worry me, though, is Jason Kidd. And I say that the same day that he got signed to a multi-year extension. But the reason why, I want to go back to Mavs Clippers Game 4. Let's recap that real quick. The Clippers led by as many as 31 points in that game. James Harden's 3 made the score 55-24 with 5 minutes and 43 seconds left in the second quarter. Now, Dallas came all the way back, took the lead at 105-104 with Kyrie's crazy layup over 3 guys. That was with 2:15 left in the fourth. Then Paul George hits a step-back 3 from the right corner, and the Clippers close it out with James Harden having 2 floaters over Luka, 1 between Luka and Maxey, and then 2 past PJ and over Maxey in drop coverage. That's 5 floaters in the last 5 minutes. And he even said that the Mavs' game plan was to shade James Harden to his offhand, which was his right hand, because he's left-handed. And so he just read the defense and took what they gave him. On the flip side, Kyrie Irving had 40 points after scoring 0 in the first quarter. I mentioned this in the first segment. First time in NBA playoff history that a player scored 40 or more points after scoring 0 in the first quarter, at least since the play-by-play era started, which was the 1997 playoffs. Now, about Jason Kidd, the coaching adjustments down the stretch in this game blew my mind, and I'm sure it blew the minds in a negative way for a lot of basketball people, for a lot of analysts, for fans, really. I mean, just everybody kind of knew something was wrong with the lineup in the last couple of minutes. He ran this clutch time lineup of Luka, Kyrie, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington Jr., and Maxi Kleber. They played 10 total minutes the entire game. Their offensive rating was a 150. Their defensive rating was a 156.3, and their net rating was a negative 6.3. Not really great if you want to outscore an opponent. The best lineups in the second quarter of that game came off of Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Josh Green, PJ Washington, and Derek Lively II. They played 5 minutes together in the second quarter. Their offensive rating was a 210, and their defensive rating was a 140, making their net rating a 70. Again, when you take a much smaller sample size than one game, let alone a whole season, these numbers are going to spike in one way or the other. So, of course, it's not something to look at where you're like, oh, they'll have a 210 the whole way. No, eventually it'll come back down. But it's important to know that if you want to use a lineup in a short stretch, look at how well they played in short stretches. And then let's take a look at this other lineup with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington Jr., and Derek Lively II instead of Maxi Kleber. They played only 2 minutes in the second quarter with an offensive rating of 150 and a defensive rating of 83.3. The net rating was 66.7. Again, anything that happened on the floor will affect these numbers, and so maybe they just had a really good 2 minutes. But most of the best Game 4 lineups featured either Derek Lively II or Daniel Gafford. When Luka needed rest or was in foul trouble, Kidd could not go to Dante Exum like he could in the regular season. He wasn't really playable in this matchup. So by not having Exum, your margin for error is even smaller. And so let's look at Exum. He was featured in numerous lineups with negative net ratings in the series and led to more of Jaden Hardy and Josh Green, which contributed to that first lineup I talked about that played 5 minutes in the second quarter. This plays a role in why Maxey, if he's going to be on the floor, he needs one of the big guys next to him. It can't be Maxey at the 5, and we expect the Mavs to just play great defense. Like, they can have a short spurt, but that's not going to last. Now that Maxey's hurt, Jason Kidd isn't able to use him in the lineups in the way that he wants to. The same way goes for Hardaway. And so by force, Kidd has no choice but to use Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively II now. And I think the Mavs will be better for it. Let's say Maxey wasn't hurt. If he just used Maxey a little bit less, or he used Maxey next to one of those big guys, they would still have overwhelming success compared to if they didn't have one of those big men on the floor. Now, how I see the Thunder and Mavs series shaking out, the result, I will give that in the third segment. First, I want to give an update on the first round now that it's over. On my picks, Let's start with the first round bracket in the Eastern Conference. The number 1 Celtics and the number 8 Heat. I picked Celtics in 5. Boston won the series 4-1. 5 games. Number 4 Cavaliers, number 5 Magic. I picked Cavs in 6. Cleveland ended up winning the series, but in 7 games. Number 3 Bucks, number 6 Pacers. I picked Pacers in 6. That's exactly what happened. Indiana won in 6 games. Number 2 Knicks, number 7 76ers. Picked Knicks in 7. New York ended up winning 4-2 in 6 games. Transition to the Western Conference. The number 1 Thunder and the number 8 Pelicans. I picked the Thunder in 6, and yet the Oklahoma City Thunder swept the Pelicans 4-0. The number 4 Clippers and the number 5 Mavericks. I had Mavericks in 7 in case Kawhi played. And based on my bracket on NBA.com, I also entered Mavericks in 7. However, the Mavs won in 6. The number 3 Timberwolves and the number 6 Suns. I had Timberwolves in 7. The Timberwolves are not playing around. They swept the Suns 4-0. And then the number 2 Nuggets, number 7 Lakers. Nuggets in 5 was my pick. Denver ended up winning 4-1. So I did get every team right. I'm going to say that. I'm not going to toot my horn for that much longer. But let's try it again. How about we do it for the second round? Coming up next. In the next episode, we will update the playoff bracket in the second round. We'll take a look at the Mavs Thunder series in greater depth. And since we're not broadcasting those games locally, it should give me a little bit more time to actually look at these games and kind of do things on my own rather than build for a show and get moved around on all these different shows that we're doing. Right now, we're just doing baseball at this point. So that'll give me a little bit more focus on the playoffs, on the series I want to see. And now that there are half as many teams left, it should be easier to keep up with everything from this point on. Let's take a look at the second round bracket in the Eastern Conference. The number 1 Celtics are going to play the number 4 Cavaliers. And although the Cavs did beat the Magic in 7 games, and Donovan Mitchell got a playoff series win, I don't have them getting past the Celtics. I don't think anyone has the Cavs getting past the Celtics. Now, I see them winning a couple games. I got the Celtics winning in 6. The Cavs have pulled a surprise on Boston before. So it's not out of the question that they could win a couple games, especially at home. But eventually, Boston will win out. Celtics in 6. The number 2 Knicks and the number 6 Pacers. This one's a little bit tougher. But the Knicks, to me, are the better team. The Pacers have a better scoring prowess, if that's the right word for it. I mean, they just score so many points. They lead the league or at least led the league for most of the season in points per game. And the way that they were able to take down the Bucks, even with Damian Lillard, we know Giannis didn't play, gives some people cause for concern. For me, I think Jalen Brunson is going to dictate the pace, and the Pacers aren't going to speed him up as much as they want to speed him up. Halliburton will still be efficient. He'll still assist the ball, all that good stuff. You might have some scoring explosions from those guys, but the Knicks are just they're gritty, they're grimy. That defense, the Pacers have to deal with that defense, and that's not what the Bucks had. Although their defense improved under Doc Rivers, they don't have the Knicks defense. So I'm giving that edge to New York. Knicks in 6. Number 1 Thunder, number 5 Mavericks. We've now moved on to the Western Conference. I have the Mavericks in 6. And the reason why, of course, as I've said in episodes prior, the Thunder don't have the interior size to match up with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Of course, Chet Holmgren is there, yes, but he's the only one there. So the Thunder might have to make a transition where they use some more big men such as Bismack Biyombo, but I mean, he's not going to keep up with Lively and Gafford. These guys are 25 and under. For the Mavericks, they have to prioritize going into the paint, getting offensive rebounds, second chance points. The Thunder are a hard defense to get past. They're going to force a lot of turnovers. The Mavs are one of the best teams at holding on to the ball, except when they play Oklahoma City. It's ridiculous how much their turnovers go up when they play the Thunder. So that's something that you have to take into account. The Thunder are going to get those turnovers because they've done it practically every game against them. So the Mavs will need to limit the turnovers as much as they can, be efficient on the floor, which is hard to do against that defense. But where they're going to bread their butter is, or the phrase is butter their bread. Where they're going to butter their bread is in the paint, at the rim, with size. That's where they have to go. They're not going to be able to outshoot this team. And given that out of the 4 matchups, the only one where everyone was healthy was February 10th, and the Mavs blew out the Thunder in that game by a lot, I don't see that happening every game. It's going to be a lot tighter throughout the series. But that's the Mavs at their best. The Thunder at their best is probably better than what we saw in that game. But I don't think they can keep up with the Mavericks throughout an entirety of the series. So I'm picking the Mavericks in 6. And then for the number 2 Nuggets and the number 3 Timberwolves, initially, and on my NBA.com bracket, I had the Nuggets in 6. How the Wolves played in the first round made me lean towards the Nuggets winning in 7. The fact that Anthony Edwards dropped, I believe it was 43 in game 1 and stole a game already from the Mile High, yikes, I'm not confident in this pick. The Wolves scare me, and they should scare everybody because that defense is legit. And offensively, they are a juggernaut when all those guys are going. It's not just Anthony Edwards. Again, I've said this in the last episode. You got Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels is an X factor. He's going to be an X factor in every series they play. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Mike Conley, who just won Teammate of the Year, Naz Reid, the 6th Man of the Year, if I didn't already say his name. There's just so much that the Wolves can lean on that the Nuggets really have to try to match up well. Of course, they're going to make the adjustments. I still think the Nuggets will win in 7, but if they lose both games at home, I don't know how I feel about this pick. So now I've adjusted to Nuggets in 7. My bracket is unfortunately locked at Nuggets in 6, but Nuggets will probably win this in 7. And then again, NBA Finals prediction, in case you missed it the last time. Number 1 Celtics versus the number 2 Nuggets. I have the Celtics in 7. Again, these two teams might not even make it all the way there, as I just explained. Now, before we go and end this episode, I want to give a shout out to the Dallas Stars. Again, a local team at the beginning of this show. Not this episode, but this entire season. The Texas Rangers were en route to a World Series title, and I made sure to highlight them every episode I could. Now that the hockey playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs are running through the NBA playoffs at the same time, just want to show some love to those guys winning a Game 7 at home against the reigning Stanley Cup champions, Vegas Golden Knights. Congratulations to them. Wyatt Johnston is playing a fantastic game, a fantastic season. He's so young, I believe under 21. And this is really the last gasp for all these guys on the Stars. So if you're into hockey, take a look at them. We're also no longer broadcasting them locally, so you're going to have to look. If you want to see them on TV, you're going to have to look on national television for that. So just giving my love to another Dallas team, another local team. Haven't won a cup since 1999. Haven't been to the Stanley Cup Finals since 2020. But if any team can do it, it's this number 1 team in the West that could do it. Shout out to you guys. All right. Thanks again for watching and listening to this episode, for watching and listening all season. We are still going all the way through the NBA Finals. Hope to see you around in the next episode. that does it for me. This has been The Control Room. I am your host, Esrael Johannes, signing off.